So EPF just announced that for 2025, the dividend payout will be 6.15%. Everyone is happy, and look, honestly, it is a really good performance. It is slightly lower than 2024 at 6.3%, but in my opinion at least, that is understandable considering that the FVM KLCI didn't perform so well in 2025. It only returned, I think, 2 point something percent. It is still higher than their 10-year average dividends, which is I think around 5.88%, and their total payout was 79.6 billion ringgit as EPF actually hit the highest trading income ever. Another plus point for them is that they managed to grow their assets under management to 1.4 trillion ringgit. That is actually a massive amount of money, and it is a lot more difficult to sort of give these kind of returns when you're managing that much money. So credit where credit is due, I think EPF did a really good job. But most people treat EPF as their only retirement plan, and some people even treat it as their only savings plan, and that is where it is extremely risky for a lot of us. Look, I'm not here to bash EPF. I am a big fan of them. I think, like I said, they've done a fantastic job year over year, and I think it's one of the best things about working in Malaysia. But as someone who has been in this system and right now I'm contributing zero towards EPF, I do have some thoughts to share around this. So the issue isn't the return. The return is fantastic, right? The issue is the assumptions that EPF makes about your life. Now, it's not actually the assumptions that EPF makes about your life, but it's the assumptions that Malaysians make when it comes to the EPF. And to be fair to EPF, when I attended their ISWC event last year, they actually mentioned this as well. The career/lifestyle path of a typical Malaysian moving forward will not be the same as it was in the past. So the first assumption that a lot of people make when it comes to the EPF and their retirement plan is that they assume that they will be employed forever. See, the thing is, as soon as you stop working, the contributions towards EPF will stop as well. The contribution from your employer, the 12 or 13%, whatever it is, it will automatically stop once they stop paying you a salary, and then your own mandatory contributions as well, every single month, that will also stop. So this is a risk where if you say, hey, if I continue working, if I continue making these contributions until I'm 55, I should be fine. But the problem is, what if you get laid off? What if you lose your job? What if you can't work anymore? These are all gaps, when you do your calculations for retirement. And if you are a gig worker, if you are a freelancer, you have your own business, you are, let's say, like me, where I'm a trader, there's no EPF, there's no salary, then yeah, you will not have any EPF contributions in the first place. And there is the thing called Aisaraan, which is, voluntary contributions. The government tries to encourage people to voluntarily contribute. That kind of helps, but the reality is most people don't. And even though there are benefits to it, I still decide not to. I'll explain more later on. And then the second assumption is that you will not need this money until you are 55 years old. So right now, of course, all of you guys know, any money that you contribute towards EPF, it will be locked until you're 55 years old. And then under the new RIA framework, any contributions that you make after 55 years old, you can only touch it once you're 60. So if let's say at 40 years old, you want to start a business, you can't touch your EPF. If at 45 you get retrenched and suddenly you don't have an income, you don't have enough money to survive, you can't touch EPF either. Yes, there is account flexible right now, which I think is a good addition, but of course there is a limit to that. If not mistaken, I think only 10% of your contributions right now goes towards account 3 or account flexible. And even then, even if you decide to withdraw from account 3, then this will take away, future money for you. So every single ringgit that you withdraw from account 3 right now is many more ringgits that you're taking away from your future self. So if you're relying on EPF as your sole retirement plan, then yeah, these situations happening, you withdrawing, that will cause a dent in your retirement plan as well. And then the third and final assumption that a lot of people have when it comes to calculating the EPF and relying on it is that your career will follow a straight line, a linear path. So EPF is designed for those people who think, I will start at a young age, I will continuously work until I'm 55 or 60 years old. Every year I will be employed and every year I will get a steady increment. But how many people actually live that life anymore, right? I think these days it's a lot more common for people to take different career paths, such as myself. And this is actually the part that EPF was talking about at their ISWC event last year. They were saying how, as we expect people to live to a longer age, they were saying at that point to 100 years old, it is very unlikely that people will go through, a linear path in their careers. It is more likely that people will decide to take career breaks, people decide to pursue a different path, start their business, do freelance, and then maybe later on go back towards corporate, right? But you have to realize that during these employment gaps, there will be no contributions towards your EPF. So the real question today isn't whether 6.15% dividends is good. To me, it is fantastic. A lot of people, they are not grateful, you know. They said, oh, last year was 6.3, how can it be 6.15 this year? Honestly, it's such a small difference anyway. I think EPF is doing a good job. But the real question is, can EPF be your sole plan for retirement? And to me, the answer is no. So let me share a bit about my story. I left corporate to become a full-time content creator and trader when I was 27 years old. And as soon as I left corporate, obviously that meant that my EPF contributions were stopping. And honestly, at the start, I was a bit sort of disappointed. I don't know if that's the right word, because I started at quite a high salary. I started working at 21 years old and I started at quite a high salary, and I had very solid increments from then. So I was actually ahead of my peers when it came to my EPF, and I actually had a quite big amount considering my age. So when I stopped, it felt a bit disheartening, you know. Am I giving away this advantage that I built? And then the worst part is actually, psychologically at least, I stopped working right before I hit 100,000 ringgit in EPF. Look, I know there's no difference between 97,000 and 100,000 ringgit. It's not a huge difference, but you know, it would have been nice to hit 100,000 ringgit. So every month I would just, you know, look at it, oh no, it's not 100k yet. But eventually the dividends came in, and right now, yeah, I am sitting quite a bit above 100,000 ringgit. But still, the contributions are not coming in anymore. It's purely from dividends. Some of you guys might think that, you know, this is good. You know, this is a lot of money to have in your EPF, and I agree. Some of you guys might think it's too little. You know, to me, it doesn't really matter because this is not my only retirement plan. The truth is, if I were to just leave this in EPF until I'm 55 years old, so there's still 25 years for me, this 110,000 ringgit will hit 472,000 ringgit. Is that a lot of money? Yes, actually it's really good considering that, you know, I don't have to put in any work. This is literally my money just working for me. But is it enough for me to retire? Obviously not, right? Even today, 470,000 ringgit is not enough to retire, let alone 25 years from now. And I know that, you know, this is because I stopped working. Obviously, if I continued working, maybe I would retire with 3-4 million ringgit in my EPF, who knows? But at this point, I had to think about what is my retirement plan on top of EPF, right? And even if I didn't quit, I would still be sticking the same thing, because like I said, there are a few things of EPF. One is we cannot assume that we will work forever, so maybe I wouldn't have hit 3 to 4 million ringgit anyway. And number two, I cannot touch that cash until 55. What if I need the cash earlier? What if I decide to retire early, right? So there needs to be another plan, and here's mine. But first up, let's talk about the retirement math, how much we think we need, and let's look at EPF's own numbers. So EPF introduced the new RIA framework in 2026. There are 3 tiers, and they all benchmark at age 60. And the first tier is the basic, so they now increase this to 390,000 ringgit as a bare minimum. So this is about 1,625 ringgit per month for 20 years. To me, that is not enough. I know for some people, maybe it is. And then there is the adequate savings, which is 650,000 ringgit. They consider this an reasonable standard of living. You will get to withdraw 2,700 ringgit per month for the next 20 years. Again, I just don't think this is enough. And then finally, there is the enhanced version, which is 1.3 million ringgit. This way, you can withdraw 5,400 ringgit per month for the next 20 years, which is better, more livable. But 20 years from now, 25 years from now, by the time I hit 55, this will most likely not be enough because of inflation. So yeah, that 470,000 ringgit that would, you know, be in my EPF account by the time I hit 55 years old, it will definitely not be enough. It would be just around, I think, the adequate tier. And that's adequate tier today. In 25 years time, this is probably like, I don't know, basic tier. And even with the old basic tier of 240,000 ringgit, only 36% of Malaysians hit it, right? Let alone the new 390,000 ringgit. Even more Malaysians will feel like they are way behind. So yeah, maybe EPF gives fantastic dividends, right? But if your contributions are not enough, or if your contributions stop, it will definitely not be enough for retirement, which is why we need plans on top of it. I actually do. For me right now, my anchor for my entire portfolio when it comes to retirement, savings, all that stuff is ASB. So why ASB? ASB to me is the closest thing that we have to EPF. It is a fixed price fund, meaning 1 ringgit is 1 ringgit. It cannot drop in value. I will not suddenly lose money overnight. And then they pay a dividend, just like EPF, but their dividends are a bit lower. So for 2025, ASB paid out 5.75% compared to EPF's 6.15%. Just a bit lower. To me, it's not a big deal. because they have one key distinction versus EPF, which is it is extremely liquid. I can withdraw it at any time I want. And that to me is critical because like I said, even before retirement age, we might need that cash and ASB provides that. So right now I have auto investments set up for my ASB. I contribute automatically. I set up the auto invest for 1,000 ringgit per month, and then I will occasionally make lump sum investments as well whenever I get, like for example, my trading payout or I get a big sponsorship deal for my content. So I will try to imagine as if I was contributing towards EPF, you know, employee plus employer contribution, except instead of going to EPF, I'll put it into ASB. So some people might be wondering, why not money market funds or stocks? So first up, money market funds, they do give a slightly lower return. I think right now they're around 3.5 to 4%. So obviously I will not touch that, but if you do not have access to ASB, then unfortunately this might be your only choice. It is similar in profile, just that the returns are lower. Or you can even try things like ASM, even though for that you kind of have to fight for it. Yeah. And then when it comes to stocks, stocks to me cannot be a replacement for EPF just because the profile is not the same, right? I can wake up tomorrow and my stocks are down 20%. It will not happen with EPF. So that's why ASB to me is the replacement for EPF. But having said that, I of course still have stocks. So stocks to me are the complementary part of my portfolio. This is for higher risk, higher potential reward. And right now I'm mainly invested into US stocks. So think of it as sort of this way, right? ASB is my base, it's my stability aspect, safe, stable dividends, and it will get me out of any sticky situations, or maybe even if there are big business opportunities, I can tap into my ASB. Whereas the stocks part is really for the long-term growth, potentially higher reward, maybe giving me, let's say, 10% a year, right? That's how I view things right now. So as I've mentioned in previous videos, right now I'm fully invested into ETFs only. Mainly one of it is called VT, which is the total world stock market. I also have this as an auto investment setup. Every single month I contribute towards it on my Moomoo account via their feature called their regular savings plan, or RSP. So if any of you guys want to invest in US stocks or ETFs, then check out Moomoo. I'll leave the link to sign up in the description of this video, and you'll get some nice freebies when you use my code to deposit. One thing I want to mention about holding US stocks right now is that because the ringgit is appreciating so much against the US dollar, we are experiencing some pain, right? Because, you know, we converted ringgit to buy US dollar to buy the stocks. Now that US dollar has fallen, in ringgit terms at least, our portfolio has fallen. And yes, it is painful, but I'm not worried because, you know, this is all for the long term. Anyway, there is a silver lining to it because when the US dollar drops, it means that when we want to buy US stocks, it is now cheaper for us, assuming we're using the Malaysian ringgit. So, I'm not saying that EPF is bad. It's genuinely, I honestly think that it is one of the best retirement plans of any country out there. I can't think of any that is more beneficial to its citizens like this. Giving 6.15% in a choppy year, in a year where the FBM KLCI only returned 2% plus, is amazing. What I'm trying to say is that think of EPF more as your floor rather than your ceiling. So don't think that EPF is the best you can do. Think that EPF is the baseline for you, and then you go and work towards building up from that baseline on your own. You can do it via EPF, even though I wouldn't recommend it because you already have, you know, monthly contributions towards EPF. So I would definitely look at other things. If you guys still want to play it safe, like I said, ASB, money market funds, they are good options, but you can then consider things like stocks, maybe a bit of crypto, maybe a bit of gold, right? There are so many options out there. So yeah, that's my take on this. EPF 6.15%, again, fantastic, but the returns were never the problem. The problem was with people over relying on it for their retirement. Let me know down in the comments of this video, what is your retirement plan like? Where do you guys invest your money? Thanks for watching this video to the end, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Give me a huge thumbs up if you did, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. See you guys in the next one. Peace out.